let's talk about the 9 books I read in April. I read a few 5 stars. I read an absolute new favorite of mine, and so I'm very excited to gush about them with you. As I said, I read 9 books, which is a total of 3,950 pages, which ends up being an average of 131 pages a day. And then the average page count of a book was 439 pages. And my most read genre was fantasy. I read 2 5 stars, 2 4 stars, 4 3 stars, 1 2 star, and 0 1 star, which gave me an average star rating of 3.56. That is not the highest. January, I read so many 5 stars. It was such a good month for me. I read 1 paranormal romance, 2 fantasy romance, 3 fantasy books, 1 horror book, 1 thriller book, and 1 sci-fi book. I feel like I got a little bit of variety this month. I had a good month, I think. A pretty good month. I mean, it is the least amount of books I've read in a month, but I also was going really easy on myself just because I was in a bit of a slump. And really what I would like to call like a pressure slump. There was just so much pressure on me that like I didn't want to do anything, and I was just like forcing myself to do things. So reading really was just like something I made myself only do when I actually wanted to do it last month. So yes, I read less books, but it was more of a hobby, less of a job that month, and I really enjoyed that aspect. The first book I read this month was Kings of Moonlight by Eva Chase. This was a 3 star. I knew this was going to be a 3 star as I read it, so it wasn't like a letdown or anything. I was very happily binging this one. This is a paranormal romance. It is a Why Choose series. It is book 3 of a 9 book series, but it's also kind of the end of a set of books. Like the books kind of have a storyline that are 3 books and then 3 books and 3 books. So this felt like a wrap up to the first 3 books, and I really enjoyed that, but I also really enjoyed the elements that we got that are leading up to book 4. In this story, we follow our main character who is kept prisoner by a pack of shifters, and she is not treated very well when another pack of shifters comes and saves her, and they treat her a lot better, and they realize that there is something in her blood that will break a curse on them, and so they kind of keep her around, and it's a Why Choose, so romance definitely happens. I think that these are just quick, easy, bingeable reads. There are not a lot of substance to them. Like, there is good plot and world building, but it's not really this detail-oriented story that you really have to be paying attention to. So for me, this is like an audiobook and do whatever. I did a puzzle while I listened to this one while my power was out. And overall, I just like had an enjoyable time with this and will continue to read this series. If you like paranormal romance and Why Choose, I definitely would recommend picking it up. Eva Chase has a lot of fun. I really like her writing. It's really bingeable in my opinion. Next up, I read A Soul of Ash and Blood by Jennifer L. Armentrout, which I also gave 3 stars. I am disappointed in this one, and then also it exceeded expectations all at once. I think when I was going to pick this one up, I was really not expecting to like it, as this is a retelling of the first book, just in the male's POV. However, it is set in the series with like little tidbits of information, so it's kind of a required read per se, and that kind of annoys me, and I didn't really think I was going to enjoy it, as it is a story I've already read. Like, I've already read From Blood and Ash. I don't need it in his POV. However, I was greatly surprised by how much I did enjoy this. I still only gave it 3 stars because I found myself not as engaged in it. It was just like something I could put on in the background, and like I enjoyed having his POV, but it was not something I felt was necessary, and I personally would have skipped this book if I could. I do think you can. I do think that the knowledge that you get from this is something that I think you could really understand really quickly in the next book, or just like look up what that knowledge is and you would be fine. I think there's like 2 chapters that really matter, and so I think I'm more frustrated at this book for being a mandatory read in the series when it really shouldn't have been. For those who want his POV, for those who love those tidbits, I'm glad they have it. I just wish it was a like 0.5 book or like outside. I don't think it needed to be in the series. I don't think we needed to have the elements of the plot that is currently happening happen within this. So I think I was really just frustrated by this. I found myself not as engaged in the latter half. As I said, I've already read the story. I knew it. I already knew the characters. I knew exactly what was going to happen. So although I enjoyed just like the light listening and like the refresher on what I loved about From Blood and Ash, because I really did love that first book quite a bit, I personally also didn't care enough to want this story of his POV of that. And that's like personal preference. There are a lot of readers who love things like that. So I definitely think to each their own on this one. For me, this was like a miss because it was a mandatory read. I would have skipped it if it wasn't, for sure. But I am very excited when the next book in the series comes out. I really do enjoy the series. Poppy is a main character for me that I just like really relate to. I really enjoy Poppy's internal monologue and things like that. It's a very easy read. I like the men in it. I like that they give her a lot of freedom and like really believe in her. I feel like this is such a staple in the romantasy rating sphere that if you haven't read it, you should try it. Whether you like it or not, that's unsure. I really loved book 1 and 2, and then I think it's book 3 that's just like a mess, but then I enjoyed 4 again. And then 5 is this book. I think if I have my numbers correctly. I might be a little bit off, but they're getting better again for me, and I really am happy that I stuck through and I'm continued to read. I'm very, very excited for the next book to come out. Then I did TBR swap with Sarah from Wicked Reading. I'll leave that video in the description bar in case you want to check it out. And she got me to read Rain and Ruin by J.D. Evans, which is a fantasy story. It is one of the ones that I counted as fantasy. I also gave this 3 stars. I think I'm going to continue in the series. I listened to the audiobook and I did enjoy the audiobook. We're essentially following our main character who is the heir to the throne, but she's a woman, and in this time it is expected of her to marry and then her husband will become the king. However, her father, who is the current king, has always believed in her and been like, when the time comes, we're gonna make you the queen and you can rule. Like, you don't have to marry off. You're not that. You're a capable, strong young woman who I believe can rule our country. You have my beliefs and I believe in you. But when the time comes for this eventual pass off, her father actually has been losing his memories and he is no longer on her side. He no longer can be trusted to help with this potential move, and she is struggling in politics and stuff when the world is against her as a woman wanting power, and she has to find unlikely allies in order to scheme her way to her rightful position. I think there were some very beautiful discussions in the story. My complaints about it were that it was a little bit more political, heavy-handed, and the type of politics that's very like in the courtroom. Like, it was very much talk, talk, talk. And there is a romance in this as well. A lot of people do actually categorize this as fantasy romance. In my opinion, it's a romantic fantasy. To each their own. Those terms sometimes mean the exact same thing. It really is so hard. It's just like this felt like more fantasy heavy. It felt like the story was the fantasy completely to me. But there is a romance in it, kind of in the vibes of like the Daevabad trilogy. And so I didn't love the romance, but I didn't hate it either. I did enjoy their times together and found myself laughing at things they said and stuff like that. But I wasn't like deeply invested in it, like rooting for them either. I just found it like enjoyable enough. And so I feel like that's how I felt about the story in general. It was enjoyable enough, but I am intrigued enough that I think I am going to continue. If you like a political heavy story, I definitely would recommend picking this up. It is an indie fantasy, very, very underrated. So definitely try and check this one out if any of these things are buzzwords for you. I do think it had some really interesting moments. I really did like the magic system and stuff. Like, I am intrigued to continue. And then after that, I read The Lamb for that same video with Sarah. This is a cannibal story. I'm not going to say much about it. It's very, very short. We're just following our main character who is a cannibal and what that means. I was very bored in this one. I ended up giving this one 2 stars. Not my typical read. I definitely like a little bit more action-packed, a little bit of a crazier story than this. And I feel like this was really just about the breaking of trauma and the breaking of habits and things like that. If you are more literary leaning, I think that this one would really, really work for you. For myself, it didn't really work for me. I would be interested in trying more from the author in the future though, so I will definitely keep my eyes on her a little bit. I liked her writing style enough. Just this story didn't really work for me. And then I read another 5-star. I read The Queen of Nothing and I finished the Cruel Prince series. I was worried I wasn't gonna love this one as much as the first 2 because it had been a while since I read this, but I was pleasantly, happily, still absolutely invested into Jude and Cardan's story. I think this is my favorite in the series, which I think is kind of controversial. I do think it was far too short. This is the final book and it is the shortest, and I typically want books to get longer with each one as I want more time with the characters and the plot and the world building and things like that. The first book is really just meant to like grip me. I loved where this went. I just like love what this is. I love that it's a little bit more traditional Fae leaning with like the lore and stuff, and I love that I can see that so many of my favorite books, my favorite romanticities, have been based around stuff that happened within this series. Like, there's a reason this is so popular and a lot of authors have taken inspiration from it, but that this still stands out so completely to me as something so unique and never done before. And I think that that's really a telling of such a beautiful story. I read this one for my cartoon Picks My Reads. I read it for the Fairly Odd Parents and it matched that so perfectly, and I think that's fun. I'll leave that video also linked down below for you. I had a good month of vlogs in my opinion. Some of my favorites. I don't really know what to say about this. It's such a well-loved series where we're following Jude, who is a human, and when she is, I think like 7, like she's quite young, her parents are murdered by her half-sister's dad and he ends up adopting all 3 of the siblings, not just his own like biological child, and bringing them back to fairy. He is a fairy, and so he raises them as his own. He has the one that is also a fairy, and then Jude and her twin sister who are humans. Since they are raised in fairy as like nobles, they're above what regular regular humans are in this world. They are treated a lot better. Humans do not have it well in fairy at all. But they're also still human and they're not actually fairies, so like the fairies also kind of bully them and stuff. They're this like weird like middle ground in fairy. And Jude says to us that she's gonna prove to all these fairies that she's just as good as them, and that's what we get to watch her do in this series. I loved her so much. I truly loved this. I also love stories about siblings, and Jude and her sisters really, really did get me in my feels at times. Very much happy that I finally read the Cruel Prince series, because it was a 5-star series for me. And after that, I read Enchantra by Kaylee Smith. I gave this one 4 stars. Kind of a letdown actually for me, considering Phantasma was one of my absolute favorites. I read Phantasma in January, and I think that's part of the problem for me. I think I read Enchantra a little too close to Phantasma. I'm excited that I read this at the time of it coming out, so then I have a year between the next book, because this is very, very similar to Phantasma. We're following our main character who goes into a house, is trapped, and goes into some trials. The romance itself also feels very similar in terms of like the banter and stuff. I preferred the trials in Phantasma. I think that they were more different. I saw someone, I don't remember who it was. Was it Jess from Peace Loves Books? I think it was, on their podcast episode. She was talking about how these trials all felt very similar, and in Phantasma they all felt very, very unique. And I think that I agree with that. They were all hide and seek essentially, and I wanted more variety from these, as I got the variety in Phantasma. I loved the Phantasma trials so much. Although I was still intrigued by these ones, it definitely was like, oh, it's just another variation of hide and seek again. Like, I really wanted that to just be a little bit different. I still enjoyed it. I still had fun. I actually do think this is a better written book than Phantasma in terms of like writing style. I do understand why some people will like the romance more in this, but like for me, Blackwell has my heart. I think Blackwell had some of the perfect quotable lines in Phantasma, and I feel like I really missed the quotable lines in this. Although I liked the two of them together, I just didn't feel like I was like quoting. Like, I didn't feel like I needed to highlight the things he was saying. He felt a little bit more normal, like a normal man just fallen in love, than Blackwell, who was professing his entire love and saying the deepest things to her constantly. So yeah, I enjoyed this one. I didn't love it. For those who have not read Phantasma and want to jump right into this one does spoil a lot of Phantasma. I don't think that if you want to read Phantasma that you can just jump into this one, but if you are not really sure about Phantasma, and if you don't really care that maybe the twist at the end of Phantasma is spoiled for you, or like the happily ever after, then you can probably jump into this one. But I do know that people have been questioning whether they can be read like a romance and a little bit more in any order, but I do think they're meant to be read one after the other. But I think you could. So like maybe, depending on who you are as a reader. If you don't like any kind of spoiler, read Phantasma first. If you don't care, read Enchantra. I am very excited for the next book. It has been set up in this one, and I am very intrigued, and I would honestly love there to be like 7 books in the series. Even though it's like the same thing over and over again, I think that I just like liked it so much. It was just such an easy read and enjoyable still, even if it wasn't the 5-star that I wanted it to be. And I would recommend giving some time between the books and not just doing a binge. And then I read The Last Session by Julia Bartz, which I ended up giving 4 stars. This is the same author as The Writing Retreat, and this one I don't think gets as unhinged, but still a little bit. We're following our main character, who is a psychologist, and when she stumbles across a patient, she ends up getting torn into this mystery of who this patient was, where they came from, and when the patient goes missing again, she goes to track this patient down at a retreat. It's like a mind and body healing through your trauma and finding your next great love retreat. It's very cult-like. I really enjoyed the cult aspects of this one. I really enjoyed what the author was saying in this one about healing, about trauma, about conditioning. I definitely think there's some triggers that you should look out for in this. Definitely read up on trigger warnings if you have some, especially around a cult and things like conditioning or sexual assault. But overall, I just like really did enjoy this one. I don't think it was like an all-time favorite. I think it took a while. Like the Writing Retreat, I remember being obsessed with from like page 1. It took me until I think we were at the retreat for me to really like get my pages turning and being invested. It was a slower start, building a lot more character work and things like that, but I really did enjoy the latter half of this, and so it was a 4-star from me. After that, I read This Woven Kingdom, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I liked elements of this one. I liked the world building quite a bit. I loved loved the like mythology and the lore, and I liked the discussions on privilege and all of that, but the writing was a little bit harder for me. It was a little too matter of fact for me and not as immersive for me into the story. And then I also think I went into this with the wrong expectations, because a lot of the romantasy girlies had been screaming about this one last year. A lot of people were like, oh my god, he's the next book boyfriend. I love this. This is like the next romantasy. And I don't think that it read romantasy at all for me. I would call this a YA fantasy through and through. I don't even think I would call it a YA romantasy, but maybe that changes in the later books. I personally did not find myself invested in the romance. I did not find myself invested in the ending of the book. I actually liked the first half a lot better, which is kind of rare for me. Normally if I'm loving a first half, I typically end up loving the entire story. But in this one, the second half really just like wasn't for me. I didn't like the plot twist at the end. I feel like things were moving too fast without like letting us like sit in our feels a little bit. I feel like it was just so matter of fact. Like honestly, I think that's my struggle, is I felt like the writing style was very matter of fact. Like this is this, that is that. It didn't really leave a lot up to interpretation. And I like when stories do that. They really make me think. And this one was just very much like, here's the platter of cheese. This is mozzarella. This is cheddar. This is applewood smoked. You didn't really have to like taste test to find the right cheese. That was the weirdest comparison ever, but we're gonna leave it in. Yeah, so I am intrigued to continue this one, but I think I need to continue soon or I will lose interest in continuing. And then the final book I read this month is an absolute new favorite. It's a 6-star read for me, and it's Silver Elite by Dani Francis. This is the sci-fi book that I read this month. This is a dystopian romance. We're following our world that has been bombed and there was gas released, and 50% of the population has grown to be immune to that, and 50% of the population was modded by it, was changed by it, and given a magical power. At this time in our society, the primes, which are the people who are immune to it, are in control, and they are trying to kill, exterminate, or chain anyone who is modded. Our main character, of course, is modded. She can read people's minds, and she has to hide this. When she is given a pass into Silver Elite, which is the highest elite military squad, essentially, she enters and tries to pass, hoping to make a difference. However, she has to keep her powers a secret. And of course, the captain is very hot, very swoon-worthy, very much the son of her enemy, but why can't she keep her hands off of him? This was so good. I very, very, very much enjoyed this one. I keep saying this is Fourth Wing meets Divergent, dystopian world, but with a military academy and like squads. Like Silver Elite essentially is a squad, and like that training aspect and the enemies to lovers of that. Although at times it does also remind me of 4. I definitely get more Divergent themes from this, but with like the bingeable crack turning the pages of Fourth Wing. This is going to be the next big book. I swear it. I swear it. Everyone needs to pick this one up. It was so good. I really, really, really loved this one. The writing style is definitely a little bit more just like bingeable popcorn. It isn't the most like in-depth, but also for a debut, I think it was really, really, really well written. And I really, again, liked the themes in this one. I really, really enjoyed this story. I read it in literally one sitting, and I've been screaming about it ever since. So please pick up Silver Elite. Let me know what your favorite book of the month was. Mine was definitely Silver Elite, and leave me some sort of like silverish gray emoji in the comments if you just wanted to say you were here. I'm also going to leave the vlog where I read Silver Elite up on the screen for you. Trust me, you want to see me screaming about this book. And have yourselves an absolutely remarkable day.